Hi guys, welcome to Glitch in the Code. I'm here with Dyer. He is the author of some incredible books. He is the Esoteric Hollywood, volumes 1 and 2. And the amount of work that Jay's done on his website is amazing. Now, we were just talking before we started recording about us in the UK being quite far behind, apart from someone like David Icke. Jay, what I really wanted to ask you, really, was what was the first moment that you started to realise that the world really isn't the way that you've been taught to believe it is?
The first moment I started to realize that was probably when I was about 18, maybe in high school, but particularly around age 18, I started reading some books about cults, and I started noticing that cults had a pretty scientific method actually for how they can manipulate people, how they can get them to accept things that are, commonsensically, obviously not true, but with the power of, social engineering, the power of all kinds of techniques, cults are able to get people to believe the craziest things imaginable. And that kind of opened me up to the possibility that, well, if this is true of these weird cults that we all know about from, TV, the media covered Heaven's Gate back in the 90s, nonstop when that was happening. I started thinking, well, maybe what if that was true on a larger scale? What if we are all kind of in a big cult, and we're in the process of leaving that cult. Hopefully, what if there's a way out of it? Is that even possible? So that's where I would say it began, was reading, I don't know, 3 or 4 books that just kind of dealt with those weird cults.
I think what you've hit on there is incredible, because that the psychology of cultism. I mean, things like AA. I mean, myself, I went to AA for a little while, just to kind of see how it was, and it seemed to me like the 12-step program, whether you believe in it or not, it seemed to have a cult-like ways of mind control. It's the stripping down. Do you see the patterns in the way, in the work that you do in different areas, maybe like the music industry, politics, religion? There seems to be patterns of the outcome, the conditioning of a person.
Absolutely. No, that's the thing, is that you start to realize there is a pattern to it. The military is another great example of this. My dad was in the military, so I knew a little bit about how boot camp, what that was used to do, how that works to break the person down and to rebuild them into the image of what the military wants. They want a killing machine. They're going to break you down and turn you into a killing machine. And what is that but mind control? In the same way, not just cults, but really modernity as a whole, society as a whole, is a giant cult. This is something I've been saying for a long time. And it's almost like a bunch of little cults within a big cult. So you could have people who worship America and Americanism. That could be a form of cult. And they feel like, God has ordained them to spread America and Americanism to the whole planet. That's kind of the basis of a lot of the foreign policy, for example. And it doesn't really matter what. I mean, everybody has this kind of a perspective, whether they want to or not. That's another aspect of what I cover at my site, is how people have paradigms, they have worldviews, and no matter who we are, we intentionally believe. We have presuppositions that we want to spread to the rest of the world, whether we want to or not. So we're all, in a way, religious. We're fundamentally believers in some kind of a system, whether we know it or not, and whether we are consistent with our presuppositions or not. So not too long after I read some of those books on cults, I started reading some books on philosophy. I decided that that's the path I would take in college. So there were pros and cons to that. I finally realized that the academic system is not favorable to people who are independent thinkers, people who don't want to go along with what the power structure teaches and what they mandate for academia, because it's actually a giant brainwashing system as well. It was actually the universities that participated, for the most part, in the MK Ultra experiments. It wasn't some secret underground base somewhere. It was dozens and dozens of U.S. universities. So if you want MK Ultra, it's not, mind control assassins in an underground base. It's the professor at the local university. And I started realizing that too. I read some of the earliest books I read that dealt with conspiracy, as I started branching out from these other topics, from cults to philosophy, then to kind of conspiracy related stuff, American history, CIA type history. Started studying that stuff in college. You start to realize, hey, there's something about this system that is particularly pernicious, and they all have the same patterns as you noted.
Does it make you feel, once you start to look into these things, does it make you feel a little bit lonely on your own, as if you can't talk to other people once you start to understand this stuff? The people that you used to be friends with, you have to you change your friend circle. Do you feel a little bit, it isolates you a bit because you can't relate, you can't talk to these things about to people that don't look into them, so you'll be judged? Do you feel like you have to keep, you kind of secluded yourself within the work?
It is alienating, for sure. There's no doubt about that, because you're delving into topics that most people just simply don't want to delve into. So it's not really that necessarily it's crazy. But even, for example, let's say you're just studying philosophy. You're not looking at anything conspiratorial. 95% of the population has no knowledge of philosophy and isn't interested. They don't care what you read in Plato. They're not interested in Aristotle or Hegel. So just the topics and the subject matter itself is alienating in that sense. But when you really get into the difficulties of challenging people's paradigms, and you learn very quickly that even if you didn't mean to challenge people's paradigms, if you start questioning this or that religious tradition that you were raised in, if you start questioning the system of Americanism, the presuppositions of America, what it stands for, all those things are certainly not welcomed if you're going the route of studying philosophy, questioning things. So it is alienating. You can lose yourself in the work. But one thing that Patrick Henningsen said a long time ago that I found to be accurate was that you go through phases. So you go through phases of kind of waking up and learning these things. And there's a phase where it is really difficult, really lonely and alienating perhaps. But then eventually you get over that and you can process it. You can take it in. You actually, you're stronger from having maybe lost some of the attachments that you had, some of the people that you thought were friends or whatever. You become a stronger person, I think.
I think you're right. You become more self-sufficient and self-reliant. Right. I'm quite good friends with Gareth Icke, which is David Icke's son, and we speak a lot about this. And he said the only way that he kind of balances out is that he has to learn how to split wanting to help the world and still care about Derby County, his football team, winning on a Sunday afternoon. And he has to learn a balance between the two, just find a fine line. Do you find that you have to work at kind of living in the world and doing things that kind of might feel like you're wasting your time? I did. I certainly felt that way before I quit grad school and started doing what I do full time. So before doing this full time, yes, it was a situation where I would, kind of on the side research all these topics, maybe go to events or whatever. And then while I was at school or at my normal job, you definitely have to, separate these things out, put them in their own little box, compartmentalize them, I guess. But then when I started doing it full time, I quit my wage slave job and started seeing if I could do what I do now full time, and it took off pretty quick. Thankfully, was able to do it. And then it becomes a new challenge. It becomes a challenge of, well, do I want this to dominate my life? And then it becomes a question of balancing, kind of the business side of things and making a living, choosing, what events to do or not do. And so it's a whole new set of challenges that come along. But it's not anymore. Now it's more so about balancing out which subject matters I want to cover, because it's kind of a weird thing where there's three different audiences. One of the audiences is interested in philosophy. One of the audiences might be interested in movie analyses, and another audience might be interested in, something else that I talk about. So now it's a different way of kind of boxing things up and compartmentalizing. Do you think, is there one particular area that you're passionate about right now that you're getting into, that something's piquing your interest right now?
Actually, I'm enjoying the challenge of trying to do more silly stuff, because I think there's an aspect where we have to be kind of lighthearted and comedic about the stuff that we
Yeah.
deal with, because it's so dark, and it can really kind of darken your mind and get you in a dark place. So I think it's helpful to be comedic and silly about things at times. And I've always had that side of my personality. I used to, kind of do improv and theater and all that. So I'm enjoying incorporating more of the satirical aspects to what I do.
I think it's really good, and it's really needed as well. I really do think you can lose yourself in this so easily in the darkness of it, and it is dark. And it's when you get into the deep levels, and it comes back, and everything's turning down that alley of child abuse keeps popping up, and you're thinking, how much do I really want to look down this rabbit hole, if you want to call it that? And especially when it comes to things like that. When you've got all of this Michael Jackson documentary coming out, and the connections to Oprah and Harvey Weinstein and Dave Geffen, and you start to look into all these connections, and you think, wow, how much do I really want to know? So humour is massive. I think someone like Ricky Gervais has done a really good job of finding a fine line in his work between dark humour. The dark sense of humour really helps. Do you find that?
I think so. There is an aspect of dark satire to a lot of the skits and goofy stuff that I've been putting out, and a lot of the podcasts we've been doing have been a little more comedic lately, and I'm enjoying it. People seem to be enjoying it, so yeah. I don't know. I mean, the weird part too about doing this is that you don't. It's not planned out. You don't know what to expect. So 2 years ago, I had no idea I'd be doing this. So who knows what's going to be happening in the next 2 years? But aside from the sort of satirical comedic aspect of things, I've tried to incorporate more of the serious philosophy lately as well at the same time. So it's a really weird mix. I don't know. I don't think that anybody's really. Well, I mean, everybody's kind of new to. Nobody was a YouTuber 15 years ago. That didn't exist. Nobody was making a living doing that 15 years ago, but here we are. Now there's live streaming. Now there's, all these different means by which a person could potentially make a living. And I don't know. It's just a weird, wacky world that we're in.
It's a very strange time, isn't it? It's a very kind of convoluted time where you don't really know where you stand, especially in this sort of work. Is there a film or some, that came out that really stands out to you that had esoteric Hollywood symbolism that really stands out to you, of one to watch for anyone who really has a little peak interest in this and is just new to it and thinks that none of this happens?
Well, the obvious one is certainly Eyes Wide Shut. Everybody needs to start there, because if you were a skeptic, even the most skeptical skeptic who has seen the news of the last few years, be it UK with Savile and be it the Roman Catholic Church with its countless sexual scandals, or any of the other, weird spheres of society that seems to be involved in this stuff. Kubrick, it seems like, was telling us this a long time ago, and there's not really any denying that now. And, I think the weirdest part for me was, growing up as a movie fan. I love movies. I wanted to be in movies. That's all I cared about as a teenager. Another one I would suggest is Conspiracy Theory, the Dick Donner movie, because I remember when I watched that, it stuck in my mind, and I thought, that's weird. I wonder if any of those crazy conspiracies that Mel Gibson's into, I wonder if any of those are real. That would be crazy if they were. And then, of course, it turns out, the plot of the movie is that he is a victim of MK Ultra. So, there's an aspect of reality to that film. So that one kind of set me off. I could have put it in the back of my mind, thinking about, okay, Hollywood, MK Ultra. All right, well, that was interesting. And I remember Jacob's Ladder, the Adrian Lyne film, and some of those others that came out in the 90s kind of sat in the back of my head, just kind of fermenting back there. And when I was in undergrad, I had come across some books that mentioned conspiracy as it related to Hollywood, maybe in passing. And then I still didn't think too much about it. And I thought, well, I wonder if you could really go down that rabbit hole. And I remembered that I had a professor who was really into Oliver Stone. And so we started watching some Oliver Stone films I took some film classes at that time. And he said, why don't you dive into Stone? So I started watching, all of Oliver Stone's movies, and I realized, well, hey, I knew who Oliver Stone was, but I hadn't, really dived into his whole canon of films. And I started realizing, man, he's actually documenting all of these real world conspiracies. I wonder if there is an aspect of conspiracy that relates to Hollywood itself. So turns out, yes, the more I dove into that subject, and eventually you find out there's actually academic works just on that topic, right? CIA in Hollywood by Tricia Jenkins, Operation Hollywood by Donald Robb, or David Robb, I can't remember he's the editor of it. But so there's a few books out there like that, and I thought, well, those are academic. Nobody's going to be reading those except people who are, professors or specialists in that subject. So why not try to look at this from a not just an academic standpoint, but also a wider scope subject of all of these different movies, what's real, what's fake, what about the symbolism in the films, try to tie all these different subjects together. So that's what I wanted to do in the book, but it really was kind of birthed out of just undergraduate research, and that was birthed out of conspiracy theory, and I was watching it.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because I did film and TV production. I've got a degree, an honours degree in film and TV production. I was the same. I came out of uni wanting to be a film director, a dramatic film director, feature films. Mm-hmm. I quickly learned that the industry itself was the biggest story, and I didn't want to be part of the industry, which was another change into my world of thinking, oh my God, this is all I wanted to do, and now I don't want to get into that industry. Did you feel the same as sort of like once you knew this stuff, it almost kind of ruined it for you, and you thought, well, if I need to get in that industry, what have I got to do to be part of that industry, and am I willing to do those things?
Well, I think, I realized that when I was younger that, I did stand up several times when I was 17, 18, and that's kind of the road that I wanted to take, was doing stand up, and it went well for being, 17, 18-year-old. Most people aren't willing to get up and do stand up when they're 17 in front of a, public audience in New York. So I did that multiple times and was going to Nashville pretty regularly where I lived to do it on the weekends. And I realized that, it's not just about the arts and it's not just about talent. I think what you're getting at is that's kind of the first thing you realize is that that's not how people necessarily are successful. I'm not saying that everybody that's successful isn't talented or a good artist. I'm just saying that there's all those other factors that you realize when you're younger you didn't take into account. You think, oh, it's just if you're the best and you're spotted for having that talent, and no, you realize there's actually all these other sort of things that you do to have to compromise. And I think that compromise aspect to it is what you realize, and what artists find so difficult, because artists don't really want to compromise. They want to put out what they find to be, sincere, authentic art. And then the power structure, necessitates, you could say, that you compromise and essentially become a tool of social engineering. So once you realize that the arts are a tool of social engineering, once you realize that, hey, Plato said this a long time ago about the arts, it kind of deflates a lot of those teenage, Hollywood type star fantasies that you had. Yeah,
it does. And very, very quickly. And then you see all these TV programs, these X Factors or The Voice or whatever, these programs are giving them it's not a chance that actually exists, and it's quite scary to watch. We've just done a documentary on social media's impact on young people's mental health, and one of the things that we came across was this thing called microfame. Everybody wanted this microfame for a minute, and they had these followers and these, and that's in itself addictive and a very, very strange thing to put on, especially like a 14-year-old. How do you sort of feel that social media is actually making a difference, to young people wanting to be in Hollywood, wanting to be stars, whereas before, even 30, 40 years ago, you would be a butcher or a baker and that would be great. Now you have to be something elevated. The pressure seems to be huge. Do you feel that pressure yourself to kind of go above and beyond just to be seen?
It's a weird thing. I know for a fact that it was done intentionally. We've had different, social media executives come out in the last year or two and actually say all this stuff, which I've been on a bunch of podcasts in the last 5 years saying that's what social media was for. If you were in the alternative media research realm, you knew what social media was for a long time ago. And there's no doubt too, after studying Hollywood for a long time, for at least a decade now, that they could tell that the narcissistic drive in each human being needed to be funneled into some means of control, and that's what social media is. It's the perfect weapon, the perfect way to take a person's ego drive and narcissism, or temptation towards narcissism, to turn everyone into. It's basically a narcissism machine. That's what it is. And Hollywood is that model because everybody would like to be famous, wouldn't they? Everybody would like to have mass recognition and everybody thumbs upping and all this kind of stuff. And so that's exactly what they did. They said, how can we take everybody and make them into an imaginary superstar? And if you watch the movie Devil's Advocate, the devil actually has a very predictive, prophetic statement, the Al Pacino devil character, long before the internet was popular, back in, it was still new. This was a movie from 98, 99. And the devil says essentially that what's coming in the future is everybody being a star on the web. You're all going to have your, 15 minutes of ego fame, what you're calling micro fame, with your own little bitty tiny empire, and you're the god of that empire. And I think that's always been a striking prophetic statement from the devil himself in Devil's Advocate that I think accurately describes social media.
I think it's incredibly scary that was in the film, and that is what you're talking nearly 20 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what's come out, and we can, looking back into films, and they're dropping this stuff into films as we go. One thing I just wanted to point out is obviously the film, the Truman Show. In that film, the guy that was in the film, the Jim Carrey character, was devastated that his life was on screen and all of it was a lie. But it seems to be the other way around now, that we all want to be the star of the Truman Show. It seems to be back in, reversed.
Yeah, I think reality TV played a role in that aspect of social engineering. In one sense, reality TV was just about saving production cost. So I recognize that. But I've also wondered for a long time, too, if there wasn't a more powerful social engineering aspect to reality TV, which prepared us for the idea, the possibility, what if your entire life could be live streamed? What if, and I remember a few months ago, in fact, it was Katy Perry. She did like a 3-day straight live streaming of her whole life just to promote her silly album. And so, this is, I think, obviously social engineering now, looking back on it. One of the things I do at my website and on my channel is I cover books written by globalists themselves, globalism book series, I call it. And one of those guys is Jacques Attali. And Attali wrote a book in 2006 where he said, in the next decade, the next 20 years, you're all going to be watching live streams. It's all going to be just live stream lifestyles. And that's exactly where we are. So he, as one of these high ranking, global strategist, planner types, CFR, Bilderberg types, here he is saying that this is what's coming is live streaming. And nobody knew what live streaming was in 2006.
Yeah.
And now here we are, Katy Perry's live streaming her entire 72-hour, boring cycle of talking to, Neil deGrasse Tyson and whoever else, whatever other goofballs she talked to.
It's madness, isn't it? And one other thing that really points out to me is when we talk about the Bilderbergs now, we talk about the Masons, the Freemasons. It wasn't that long ago that the mainstream media was completely ignoring even the Freemasons, even Masonry. It was only maybe 25 years ago in this country that they even refused that was real. But now suddenly, like the Bilderbergs, oh yeah, that's real. Yeah, we did lie about that, but that's real. Yeah, but it's not what you think it is. What is the psyop behind that? Because that seems to be like, yeah, okay,
gaslighting.
We'll let you have that bit, but not the next bit.
It's just gaslighting. I mean, we people are tossing that term around quite a bit lately, but I remember one of the films that really struck me several years ago was when I watched Gaslight for the first time, which I'd never seen, and it's a late 40s neo-noir or a noir sort of a George Cukor film. If you've never seen it, definitely watch Gaslight, because it's illustrative in the way that the con man guy who's trying to con this widow that he's married out of her money and drive her crazy. He wants to induce a dissociative state. He wants to induce a doublethink state in his target subject, his mark, this woman, played by Ingrid Bergman. And that's exactly what the system does to us, to the public. That's exactly what the state, the corporate state, the globalist state, that's what they do to the general population, is they gaslight to induce a dissociative, doublethink state.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And,
yeah, and things like Twitter. Twitter is a great example of giving someone just enough rope to hang yourself with. You've got a certain amount of characters. One of the discussions we had was that when you have an argument, it's very quick. When you talk in discussions, it's a long-winded talk. So Twitter is designed for arguing and gaslighting each other. What would your thoughts be on that?
Yes, it's. I think this was hinted at in 1984. It's the idea of limiting and basically neutralizing the language, making it it's a retardation of the language, basically, to where you can't employ any nuance. And if you can't employ nuance in your speech, then you can't think in a nuanced, profound way. You have to basically become an idiot. And I mean, again, twit. You become a twit. Yeah. I don't doubt that at times they name these things with the intention of gaslighting you and telling you what it is. You're a twit.
And it is funny, and it is. I think because we're maybe a little bit old. I'm not sure how old you are yourself at the moment.
I just turned 40.
You just turned 40, so I'm 38. So we're about the same age. I think it's completely different for us. We can see and also have a bit of humour about this technology. A 14-year-old can't. We call them digital natives in the film. They're born they're born straight plugged into this.
Right.
What your thoughts on?
There'll probably be a new social media thing that'll come in the future. It'll be the thing that maybe replaces all the other ones, and they'll probably call it TARD, short for retard, and nobody will catch it, and they'll be like, "Well, no, it doesn't mean that,"
Yeah. Yeah.
And it'll have all the other features incorporated into one. It'll be like Facebook, and it'll be like Twitter, and it'll be like Instagram or whatever, and it'll be. Have you talked to me on TARD yet? No. How do you use TARD?
Have you tarded me this morning?
Exactly.
I mean, it is mayhem, isn't it? And but I think with us being a little bit older, we can kind of see it. What worries me is that almost sense of humour is going as well. Like that ability to kind of look at it and step back from it is completely going. They've got it through films. What's your take on the music industry? I've done a lot of work in looking into investigating the music industry that ties so much into the film industry, but I mean they all go in together. The back of the music industry seems to be a lot to do with child trafficking, a lot to do with symbolism, Satanism. It's all connected. How your sort of thoughts on the music industry and how they kind of put things out in lyrics and music videos?
Yeah, it's definitely related, and I think Amazon was correct to group my book. When my book came out, they immediately grouped it. I didn't have any say-so in this. They just stuck it with Dave McGowan's book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, which is definitely a great book, classic. When he kind of did for the music genre what my book was aiming at with film. Only difference being that he doesn't really talk about symbolism. He basically just kind of went into the facade of music as counter-revolutionary. And he argues that this is really a facade. The counter-revolutionary aspects of the music industry were themselves promoted by the industry. They were done on purpose, and it was for large-scale social engineering. And that's basically my thesis for Hollywood as well. And other people have kind of piggybacked off of that too for other genres. People are starting to realize that there was some weird, sketchy aspects to the rise of the punk genre, Again, not saying that every artist in any of these genres is completely mind controlled, or is not saying that. Just saying that what happens is that even if a movement might be organic, it pops up as a kind of authentic artistic expression. What happens is that the system will watch and they'll steer it. They'll co-opt it and they'll kind of take it in the direction they want it to go. So, Dave's argument is that there were a lot of genuine anti-war artists in the 60s, and what happened was the system saw that and they just kind of co-opted the energy that was anti-war into mindless hedonism and drug use, and so it became a powerful tool for the promotion of LSD and hardcore hallucinogens and psychedelics through people like Tim Leary and Ken Kesey and all these other stooges of the establishment, basically. We know now that Tim Leary was an obvious asset of the CIA and MK Ultra.
Yeah,
his job was to promote that, and that ties directly again into the world of Hollywood. So basically, my book has maybe a section or a chapter where it'll tie into the music industry, and Dave's book has maybe one section or chapter where it ties into Hollywood. So you can see a clear connection between these two worlds. Again, because it's the exact same. The arts, as Plato said a long time ago, have to be controlled for social engineering.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what is your take on, I know I'm bouncing all over the place, but your knowledge is so widespread, I just want to touch on different things. This situation right now where you've got this Michael Jackson documentary that's just come out, you've got R. Kelly being put into the mainstream news and for what the things that he seems to have done or maybe not have done. But at the very same time, you've got Harvey Weinstein's case being seen yesterday and put back and not reported on at all. And that seems to be, to me, a kind of psyop of how can you not report on him, but you've got so much attention going on these other two things that it seemed contrived to me, not to say that anyone's guilty or not guilty, but it seems well timed to me, especially when the Oprah's connection and the Dave Geffen connection and Steven Spielberg and Dave Geffen do Dreamstone together. There seems to be a very well timed lot of information come out in the mainstream media to cover up the Weinstein type thing that's going on.
Yeah, I tend to think that a lot of times they will put out stories that will deflect from real issues, certainly. So I tend to think that what was really going on was, backdoor, like child abuse type stuff. And so what they wanted to do was deflect it into, hashtag Me Too and this kind of stuff, which, I'm not saying people weren't assaulted or whatever, that rape doesn't happen, that women don't have their butts grabbed or whatever. But I mean, don't you think there's more serious issues than and what happened was, a lot of those Viper type people jumped on this as an opportunity to further themselves. That's just what they do. So I think that a lot of those stories that come out again are just deflections from the real dark stuff that relates to the kids and whatnot.
Yeah,
that's probably what the real issue is. I've not seen the Michael Jackson documentary yet, but I think everybody's kind of known about the R. Kelly stuff for a long time too. So I think that we're just going to keep seeing more and more of these stories coming out because there's not just the spiritual aspect. There certainly is the spiritual aspect to the child abuse stuff, but there's also a blackmail aspect to it because if you've got that kind of dirt on people, you can more easily control what they do.
Yeah. And we have that goes into Parliament here not too long ago. I think it was about 2013. Right. We had the thing about Edward Heath and the child abuse in Parliament. That went nowhere. Yes. It was closed door on it. There was a guy called Tom Watson who took up it in Parliament, and he feigned, in my belief is feigned to go, like, I'm going to investigate this, I'm going to look at this, something's being done. Nothing came out of it. There was a whole dossier that Theresa May, who now is the Prime Minister, had and apparently lost. This was all, and then she becomes Prime Minister not too long ago, and Edward Heath is named in it. Who's the other guy? I can't... well, obviously Jimmy Savile was one of the main ones, but that
Cyril
goes back
Smith.
Cyril Smith is the guy, yeah. Edward Heath is the guy that took us into the EU. Right. He's meant to be a serial killer and serial paedophile. David Icke's outed him for years in his book when he was alive, and nothing He never got. It wasn't as if they tried to sue David Icke for saying this. They just ignored it. These things are so deep and it's so dark that people, I think, have a cognitive dissonance and don't want to look at it. So no matter how much is going to come out, I think there's going to be a large portion of people that just don't want to know about it. It's horrible.
Well, that's one of the means by which that angle, that dark side of the power structure can get away with what they do, is because of people not wanting to go there. And humans tend to want to assume that that's not going on. They want to assume that everybody else is I would never do that, so maybe they would never do that either. And I think, too, if people are confronting that kind of stuff, it kind of forces them, whether they want to or not, to recognize the existence of evil. Objective evil exists, quite obviously, if that's true. And most people don't want to believe in the reality of objective spiritual evil, because that would, again, force them to, like we talked about at the beginning of the talk, question their presuppositions and their paradigm.
Yeah, and they're heroes as well.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, the rock star, the movie star, that was all engineered. That was a thing that was studied, and they figured out how to create the star. There's a giant machinery, as you know, that goes into the creation of, Taylor Swift, the pop star. And that machinery has a lot of money invested in it, and a lot of people invest their energy and their time and their attention into these people, and they become in a way gods of the cult, right? Yeah. Gods of the cult of modernity, of entertainment, whatever. And so people, of course, they don't want to have their gods shown to be false.
I think this is a really good point that when you came back, you said earlier about the Harvey Weinstein and people just jumped ship. There was a straight jump from Oprah Winfrey over to it's clear that they were friends for a long time. Same with Meryl Streep. It was a clear jump. I can't see how people can't see that. So to me, again, there's a cognitive dissonance there of that. I mean, that was pretty clear, wasn't it? That was she threw him under the bus.
You speaking about Oprah or Meryl Streep?
Oprah, in that sense, was Oprah, but I think Meryl Streep was also part of that Me Too movement that probably has more to do with the problems than the solutions, in my opinion. Right.
Well, we've seen a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, did you see the stuff related to John of God?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, of course I did. Yeah, it was late last year. I mean, she was promoting him in mid-90s of this saviour, and then he's got, is it baby farms that she's doing? He's having women there just to produce
allegedly,
babies.
Yeah, and then the woman who was saying this is suicided. She turns up supposedly committing suicide, the woman who was making the allegation. So, yeah. And that was reported in the Spanish mainstream media. But it looks like they did arrest him for accusations and allegations of sexual assault. So, it's probably true. I can't say that there for sure was or wasn't a baby farm, but this is something that was going on a long time it was bantered about during the Satanic Panic as something that existed, breeders and all that. And everybody said, that's just complete nonsense. So it would be interesting if this was a full-on vindication of that reality, if that really did exist. I think that it is true. I think that does exist. Because it seems consistent with the rest of the pattern of how the system, utilizes things like what we've seen with the baby parts being sold, by certain organizations, Planned Parenthood, stuff like that. It would seem consistent that they would have baby farms. So I don't doubt that exists, but it was interesting to see how quickly that aspect of the story, which is pretty sensationalist, was kind of shut down.
And the Planned Parenthood thing as well is very interesting. It's what was it? One of the founders is Bill Gates. One of the lead names. It was Bill Gates' dad.
Bill Gates' dad was one of the founding people in that, and Katharine Hepburn was very heavily involved in it. And it ties back to Margaret Sanger as well.
Which is terrifying, really. If you think they put people like Bill Gates in the positions, do you think that this is how it works? They put these type of people in positions of power because they're almost like lifetime actors?
I don't necessarily use the lifetime actor term, because I think that people really are doing these things. They're not playing a role. I mean, in a sense, they're kind of prepped for this, but this is kind of the way that, societies before the modern world, they would raise a person to be a statesman. They would raise a person to be a king, or you in a class society, you were raised to be a noble, as opposed to, being the guy who was the baker or the candlestick maker or whatever. So they're not actors if they're actually being that person and raised to be in that role. So I think that people are kind of prepped for that. Yes. But I don't think they're actors. They really are that.
Yeah, and it's a very, very interesting, strange world we live in. So, if there's one thing, Jay, that you'd like the listener to understand about the world they live in, what would it be? How would you explain that to them?
Say that again.
Like, if there's one thing you like to take away that might change the way they look at the world, what is a bit of sort of advice? How would you what you'd like them to learn from the work that you do?
What is the one thing that I would tell people to take away? That's a great question. It's hard to boil it down to one thing. This is a bunch of things. I would say probably the most important thing might be to question your presuppositions. Are you willing to question yourself? And it might be a fearful thing at the outset. You might be a little reticent to do so, because humans just don't typically want to do that. We want to feel like we have it all figured out. We're right. Nobody likes being wrong. But you become a better person, a stronger person. Your life, actually, your quality of living increases when you're willing to challenge yourself and question your presuppositions. And that's kind of what I'm dedicated to doing.
I think that's the same thing as well. As condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance, and that was something that I've kind of lived by when I investigate these things. It's just to question everything and including your own beliefs. And I think thank you for your time, Jay, because I know you're a busy man and I really appreciate it. Is there anywhere that people can find your work, your books, your videos?
Yeah, my YouTube channels. You can just search my name and you'll find it, and then definitely follow Jay's Analysis. You can subscribe to the archives and all that at my website. I keep it pretty cheap, $4.95 a month, and the books are also available there at the website. And I do ship outside the U.S., so don't get it from Amazon. Amazon kind of undercuts the authors, but if you get the books from me, I'll sign it and I'll draw you a little pretty picture, and it'll be personalized. So. Yeah,
that's great. And thank you for your time, Jay. I really appreciate it, and I'd love to do this again at some point. And yeah, this has been Glitching the Code with Jay, Jay Dyer from Jay's Analysis. It's been brilliant. I'd really admire your work, how much you've managed to pull together in your website. So if you go to his website, and you'll find so much information. I mean, it's on an incredible level.
Well, yeah, I got censored, by WordPress.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and so actually what I've been having to do is kind of repair, because I had about 1,000 articles and posts on the website, and when it got nuked by WordPress, I'm having to basically rebuild the whole thing. So I've got a lot of them. I've got several hundred fixed, but there's several hundred more to go. So I'm just kind of doing it like day by day, where I'm restoring, 3, 4, 5, 10 old essays or articles, every day. So.
Oh, Christ. What happened there then?
It was just during a period where they were purging any of the alt media sites, and they were doing that to everybody. Yeah.
Well, that's a story in itself, isn't it? Well, thank you, Jay. Thank you for your time, and
sure.
I'd love to speak to you again soon. And please follow Jay's work, because it is incredible. And do question everything that we say, that we investigate, because this is an ongoing discussion, and we're all trying to get to the same place, I believe, and we're all trying to do the right thing. And it's a process, isn't it? So thank you, Jay, for your time. I appreciate it, mate. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye.